Hot take. I don't want a new DCU cinematic universe. Hey everybody, welcome back to BK's Bullets. My name is Brent and as always I'm your host, and I'm here with a quick commentary video. I don't do these very much because I like to do more reviews on the channel, but as I was thinking about my Quantumania review, I realized something, and so I decided to do a video about it. So we're going to work it out here in the video. But I have a hot take, and you saw it in the very beginning in the intro and in the title, is I do not want a new DCU. Now, I'm not saying keep the DCEU from Zack Snyder. I'm saying I don't want James Gunn's version of the DCU. And that's not because I think it's good or because I think it's bad. I'm reserving judgment until I see it. However, at this point, having just watched Quantumania and feel the Marvel Universe kind of sag under its own weight, it's like an old bookshelf. Not these behind me. I mean, this middle one is the oldest one I have. But I had a bookshelf before these, also from IKEA. These are Hebnes bookshelves. I had a Billy, right? And I had two of them. No, they weren't Billy's. They were from Target. I don't know. They're press board shelves, right? Very cheaply made. And I had them. I had all my trades stacked up in my old apartment. This is like before the first house, so 8-9 years ago. And the trades, the weight of the trades just made this pressboard wood sag. And you can see this Hemnes one's a little bit more solid, like it's real wood all the way across, which the reason I purchased them. But the old ones, you could tell they sagged, and even like you took the thing when I moved, I took these things off, took all the books off, and I looked at this thing and I was like, is there a way to turn this around? And no, there's no way to turn it around, because if you did, that that pressed sawdust and glue would just break. So there was no saving it. So I feel like the Marvel Cinematic Universe is at that point. We're starting to sag a little bit. And if you don't replace it with something better, or you don't reinforce it, that thing is going to break through. And I'm talking about just the weight of its own self-importance, about establishing a new villain, every saga, having something to build to. Now we have all these Disney Plus shows that are, very mediocre in terms of quality most of the time, in my opinion. There's been a few good ones, some great ones, but most of them have been pretty so-so. And I don't want that for the DC guys. I don't want that for Batman, Superman, the Justice League. Looking at the DC films of the last 10 years, what have we got? We've got some really interesting entries. I feel like Shazam is a really great movie, and so far it stands outside of the DCEU simply because it mentions Batman and Superman in their merchandise as if it was in our world. Excluding that headless Superman cameo at the end of the first film. You have Black Adam, which I thought was very interesting. Not a great film, but it was cool to see the JSA introduced, and it even kind of stiff-armed the DCEU in as much as, it did when the film ended. I'm not counting the Henry Cavill Superman cameo. You know what I mean? Like, just that first 90 minutes or so was a really interesting world to live in. You have Joker with Joaquin Phoenix, which I was talking to my wife about the other night when we were listening to a Lady Gaga song on the radio. I said, "Did you ever watch Joker?" And she's like, "No, why? Why did you? Is it good? Did you like it?" I'm like, "Yeah, I really did like it at the time." And I'm only mentioning it because Lady Gaga is going to be Harley Quinn in the next film of that little miniseries they're doing. You have the Batman, which is going to be a standalone Batman series, apparently. So to me, it seems like the most interesting DC films are the ones that can stand on their own and not be connected. Like, even The Flash at this point, seeing the first trailer come out with the Super Bowl this year, or the big game, as they want you to call it on YouTube because it's trademarked and the NFL is really litigious with that nonsense. That seemed kind of like a standalone film. I know Ben Affleck is there. I don't know if anybody else is there, but that trailer makes it seem like it could be a standalone film in terms of the DC universe, because you're getting Michael Keaton Batman, you're getting Kara Zor-El Supergirl, You're pulling from different things, and it could stand alone if they're just going to wipe everything away with James Gunn's stuff. And it might be the most interesting DCEU film ever. Aquaman stands alone in terms of a film. I know it's got ties to Justice League and Wonder Woman. They mentioned Steppenwolf in that first film, but it kind of stands on its own, and I feel like that's really interesting. So I don't really want a Justice League film. And I'm not saying anything bad about the last one. It certainly had its ups and downs. I certainly liked parts of what Joss Whedon did. I think I liked it overall. I felt like the Zack Snyder one was too self-important and too long, even though it was his true vision. Okay, sure, his storyboards for part 2 and 3 were interesting. I think they should turn that into a comic book as opposed to a film that would take forever. I mean, get fucking Jim Lee to draw it, and you'll have a super bestseller on your hands for sure. Because there's probably only 100,000 people that like Zack Snyder's Justice League, right? I'm saying that facetiously. I'm sure there's a little bit more than that. But I think DC, maybe they could do something more interesting if they have just the Elseworlds brand. This Blue Beetle film that's coming out sometime in this year, I saw a poster, 2023, here in the movie theater. Is it this summer or this fall? I want to say it's the end of August. But that is very interesting. So I feel like we could just do standalone films or these Elseworlds tales. We might have... It doesn't have to compete with Marvel. I know the corporate overlords these days are pushing to get something to compete with Marvel, but just in terms of having something interesting the audience wants to see continuously, I feel like there's a point now, post Ant-Man, where you can really take an assessment, and you can even see Marvel doing that themselves as they start to slow down on how many movies are coming out this year. I mean, they just punted Captain Marvel from July to November, which I think means we're no longer going to get whatever the November release was. It's just these 2 movies this year. So we're down from 3 to 2. They're also saying, I think I read somewhere, that we're only getting 2 Disney Plus shows this year, which is Secret Invasion and something else. I forget what it was. So we're no longer getting Echo or House of Harkness, Agatha, or, Loki Season 2, I think, is the other one, right? So they're shooting these things. They're getting ready to do them, but they're slowing them down. So if we just want to take a step back for the DCU and take James Gunn's philosophy of just getting the story right and telling something interesting that an audience wants to see every single time, as opposed to the next chapter in a repetitive storyline, which I really feel like Ant-Man is starting to push that limit in terms of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, like feeling repetitive or the same story or the same movie over and over again. I really feel like that's somewhere that DC can stand out, is if they're just going to stand back and say, you know what, we're going to do standalone films and we're going to do standalone universes, and you can take it or leave it. You don't have to have a cinematic universe. I mean, really, the only ones who've been able to do it is Marvel, after all. You have seen other people try and fail. Universal's Dark Universe had 1 film in it. They announced a whole slew of it, and then Tom Cruise's Mummies failed and sunk like a rock, and they jettisoned all those other films outside of that. Dune, we will see if Dune Part 2, captures the moment, and if we get more of a Dune series. But they're starting to build off of that first film now, with the Bene Gesserit series and this other stuff. The Batman's getting a Penguin series. It's just, there's so much corporate latching on to existing ideas, and even the nostalgia shit's getting old too, with the recycling of old styles and old culture. And, did anybody really ask for a Fresh Prince remake? Did anybody really ask for a White Man Can't Jump remake going straight to Hulu, for crying out loud? Never seen that film, but I'm certainly don't hear anybody being like, hey, what's a good idea? We should remake this weird 90s film with Wesley Snipes and Woody Harrelson, and that would be successful, right? Like, there's a lack of original ideas in media right now, period. End of story. Everything is a remake or an adaptation or whatever, and I feel like if DC's gonna want to stand apart from everything and stand on its own, then maybe doing that and not having a cinematic universe, having just standalone movie series or whatever you want to call it, would be, even if they're adaptations of legendary comic stories, would be a little bit different. and to set itself apart from its main competitor, Marvel, which they can say they're not trying to compete with, but the corporate overlords up top are really trying to drive that competition to get that stock price up, because that affects the bottom line as opposed to making really, really good art. So if James Gunn can make really, really good art by focusing on the stories that he has set up, then bully for him. I can't wait to watch really good stories from the DC Universe, whether they're connected with James Gunn or they're not connected in Elseworlds worlds. All I want is really good stories from the DC Universe from here on out. So if that comes as form of a cinematic universe, fine. If it doesn't, even better. I think that's a way that they could stand out. And I'm starting to feel the weight of this Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I don't want that for DC, because DC contains a lot of my favorites, including, Batman's my number one fave, obviously. So that's my hot take on DC and the Cinematic Universe. Let me know down below if you agree or disagree with me and why, and we'll see you guys next time in the Funny Pages.